All right, what's going on, guys? It is time once again to scroll my IG feed and analyze what is in front of us. So, first off, we've got my boy atlaspowershrugged. And so he made this post in reference to the video I made about how to get the most out of your back training, and he was just saying that he thinks he gets a lot more out of pullovers with a more of an extension bias, and I do too. If you look at that video I was doing, I'm in pretty good extension. I'm not dropping my pelvis to get like super big like rib flare, but I'm still getting pretty good extension, and you can drop your pelvis as well. The main thing is you're gonna get extension, you're gonna be more extension biased, but we still want to have some kind of intrathoracic pressure, intrathoracic control. So that just means like the area between your shoulder blades as you're coming up into a pullover kind of motion. Basically, you just don't want to do that. If you can be pretty extended and maintain that kind of dorsal rostral expansion, then that's great. If not, then you're gonna have to think a little bit more, like ribs down, a little bit less extension. But even when you're like fully extended, you still just don't like let those go. You still like keep a little bit of that intra-abdominal, intrathoracic pressure on it. So the main point of the back video I made was basically that whenever you add extension into your rows, you're not getting anything more out of your back muscles besides your erectors, and depending on what your setup is, you might not be leveraging a good way to even use them. You're actually gonna probably get a little bit less because you're compressing back there. Now, that doesn't mean you round and pull, you just kind of pull, get whatever squeeze you can get. And I'm just not popping everything out like crazy, and you can sometimes if you want to, if you feel good. As I mentioned in the post, I'm never gonna discount someone's mind muscle connection since I talk about it so much. But in general, you're gonna get a lot more activation from the back muscles and not the erectors if you stay relatively neutral as you pull. And again, there's no such thing as neutral either. It's always some spectrum. So it's not like all of a sudden you hit a point and now you're in extension. It's just you're in more extension or you're in less extension. And also, like one thing to keep in mind is when we are doing pullovers and we're doing anything and we're trying to do it from a position of extension, then you need to really understand that full spinal extension, thoracic extension, is just you taking a big inhale, letting your ribs externally rotate and your spine go into that extension pattern. So like this is it. Anything else I'm doing, like all that's not coming from spinal extension. That's just orienting the rib cage and just shoving it up. So I might get like one more bit of spinal extension through maybe like one hinge point, but I'm not getting any more on like the vast majority. So that's full extension. All I'm doing there is I'm just orienting my back and throwing my rib cage up. So you also got to think about that when you're doing your actual pullover, because what you want to have happen is you want to get a lot of anterior rib expansion as you're going overhead. Those ribs should externally rotate, that ISA should open up, but we want to stay relatively flat here. What you don't want to happen is what I just showed, where now we're just orienting that rib cage. You can leverage yourself in a really good way with extension to fill your lats. Some people might, like I said, might not be able to go in that much extension. They do need to do a little more neutral. But in general, when I do pullovers on a bench, I'm pretty extended. And so, yeah, he made this post, and we weren't really disagreeing at all on it. But I just got, and I kind of talk about that. And I also talk about how it's also positional. Like I have some guys that are around just super close down. I tell them just extend everything, orient a little bit. But if I got, a girl who's got that flared rib cage and the ass all flared up, I don't necessarily want them to be extending and dropping the pelvis into more anterior tilt. So it's always context dependent on the person. And so he shows Dr. Mike doing those horrible pullovers that I did, and here's his example. And I mean, this is great. Atlas has crazy good control and mobility of his shoulders and of his thoracic rib cage. These are all money, and now he's trying to do it flat. And yeah, I think you're going to get more pec fibers. And I think he said he felt more sternal fibers doing that. So I guess this is an old school moon bench right here is what they call that. I think there's a time and place for everything. I just think you have to understand that if you're really doing a lot of work from a super compressed position, you need to make sure that you do some things to promote expansion, because you are going to change your axial skeleton. It's going to change your joint alignment a little bit. So if you are doing a pullover for lats, you're going to get more out of it by going like bridge style, not going flat on the bench, and letting your ribs externally rotate. But again, just keep awareness of that intrathoracic pressure mainly. Don't lose that all the way. The more extension you can maintain while maintaining that, it's probably optimal to get the most out of your lats in that lengthened position. So Alice is my guy. If you haven't heard the podcast we did, definitely give that a listen. I think it was a pretty good one. It was fun. All right, so up next, we have a repeat offender. He's on here all the time, and that's just because it's such low-hanging fruit. I just can't help it. That is good old Nick Trigili. And let's see what kind of bullshit he's spouting today.
Some fitness propaganda for you to check out.
So he's calling out Zack Telander, calling him a fitness fraud.
This is Zack. He claims to be an expert at powerlifting. Does this form look like an expert is working out?
I really don't know what the fuck Nick's talking about here. Like usual, he's just talking out of his ass. So you guys know I'm pretty big on form, on technique. I wouldn't squat like that for hypertrophy focus. I would probably go a little bit lighter so I could really direct the tension where I want to. I wouldn't go quite so deep. I would focus on really maintaining strong internal rotation. I'd go slower. But you just said that Zack Telander is a powerlifting coach. He's not a bodybuilding coach. And in powerlifting, all you got to do is hit a certain depth and get up from it. And if you're using max effort, like, this isn't bad at all. Like, from a powerlifting perspective, you're getting up. And I also like that he's not getting a ton of counter rotations. He's not getting a lot of flexion or butt wink under it. So I actually think this is really good for a powerlifter.
No. How about this one? It's no better than the last one, so I'm really wasting your time at this point. So if an individual is going to call himself a weightlifting coach or a powerlifting coach and they can't do a back squat,
I mean, this is a good squat. I have no idea why Nick is trying to talk shit. I really hope people don't take this guy seriously. Like, I think only like 20% of the people that follow him actually like think he knows what he's talking about. But as I was saying, I like that Zack does not go into that dumped under pelvis position. So if you're a powerlifter or if you're somebody who's just trying to hit maximum depth in your squat, I'm of the camp that it's better to not go into that butt wink position. You know, if you have a tiny little bit and you're getting some depth and you have relative motion and it's coming with counter nutation, you'll probably be okay. But I do think it's probably ideal if you can just drive internal rotation, which, remember, internal rotation is going to be this sacrum tipping forward into nutation and the ilium's rotating around it. So if you can maintain that nutated spine longer, I think that's the most optimal position to really transfer a lot of load, because you're not getting any transfer of force to your back, to your lumbar. And you see this a lot with a lot of elite Olympic weightlifters. They won't round under. Some do. A lot of times they do exactly like Zack did and just shift forward and kind of stay in that slightly nutated position.
back squat, you have no business helping anyone. It looks like Zack is a little scared of me. He's intimidated, but Zack, you don't have to worry about me. I'm not going to hurt you. But you really should.
God, Nick is such a douchebag. Does anybody actually like this guy at all? Does he have friends in real life? So I don't even know what he's talking about here.
Take that term weightlifting coach out of your profile, because you have no business helping anyone. Zack can get.
That's so insulting. I would much rather listen to Zack. I don't know what he does much. I know he kind of goes at my boy Joel Seedman a little bit, but I would much rather listen to Zack than you on just about anything besides maybe gear and what not to do. So I don't really want to listen to this. Let's look at his squat one more time.
Some fitness propaganda for
Can
you
I
to
mute
check
this
out.
guy? Okay, let's mute this clown. Okay, so again, like I was saying, look at how he's driving those knees forward the whole time. I mean, that's really good depth. His head's up, he's in extension. His knees come in a little bit on the way up, but that's driving internal rotation. So if you want to be able to get into a deeper squat with nutation, a cue that I give, and I give this to my narrow ISAs all the time, but even if you're not a narrow, if you're trying to get maximum depth, which again, I don't know if it's the most beneficial, but if that's what you want to do, what I think you should do is, as you start the hip flexion, as you're getting deeper and starting to get stuck, think about orienting your pelvis. Think about getting into an anterior tilt. So it's an orientation, but it's still going to allow you more space to move through as far as internal rotation. So say we're descending, I'm coming down, and now I'm getting to a point where I can feel like my back is gonna wanna round or I'm gonna wanna stop. I'm gonna try to just anteriorly tilt a little bit more, and that might give me a little bit more room to move through internal rotation. And so again, if you're a narrow person, I almost always coach anteriorly tilt as you're squatting deep. If you're just a wider ISA, a lot of times I don't have to cue that, I just cue the contact points of the feet, and that's enough. But if you're going for maximum depth, again, I'd rather you stay in a little more nutated position than counter nutated. So you can think about orienting through that anterior pelvic position a little bit, and that can help. Now, you don't want to start with it. People like Dr. Mike that say preload and start with it. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. You're taking away a lot of eccentric lengthening that's occurring. So don't start like that. Wait till you start your descent and you're getting towards the midway to the bottom. Whenever you feel like you're starting to lose those foot contacts in the back position, then think about it. Don't start with it. So right here at the bottom of this, you can see a lot of people, when they get to that depth, they're going to kind of counter nutate. The shins might actually go backwards a little bit, he just stays nutated and goes forward. And I think that's great for a powerlifter. So yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, Nick, as usual. And let's see what else you're wrong about next. All right, so here he's saying if your quads aren't growing from the belt squat, and then you're probably doing them wrong, like Blessing or what will do.
From the belt squat, you're probably making the same mistakes as Blessing. All right, so I zoomed out so you can see exactly where his hips are.
Be better if you zoomed out more so you can see where the knee is traveling in relation to the feet, and if it's lined up inside the toe or what's going on at all there.
Are tracking. Instead of his hips going back, they should be going in a.
I mean, it's not a hinge. They're not going like back bad.
A straight line straight to the ground. When you shoot your hips.
That's okay. He's not throwing a big hinge. He's in a good setup to get his quads.
Hips back, it's more glutes and hams, and it's counterproductive.
There we go. There's a good one where you can see where he's
trying to do. He put these lifts under his heels.
So yeah, when we look at this, what are we getting? You are getting good glutes and hams. You're getting quads too. First of all, we don't know exactly what he's trying to hit here. Yes, Blessing needs quads, but he needs all of legs. He needs adductors. He needs hamstrings. So this isn't a bad move for him. It's not like the only thing that he needs is quads.
What he's trying to do, he put these lifts under his heels to shorten the range of motion to put more tension on his quads.
And so you can see my comment here. The purpose of the wedges is not to shorten the range of motion. Yeah, I don't know what he means by that exactly. You guys may have heard me talk about before what the wedges do. They actually kind of increase the range of motion that you're going to put on your quads. So let's look at what it does from the pelvic standpoint. Again, if you've seen this before, sorry, I'll go through it real quick. So here's us normal, walking around, slight anterior pelvic tilt, totally normal. When we go on the wedges, that puts us back into a counter-nutated position that tilts the whole pelvis and orients it backwards. Okay, it's not a relative motion where the sacrum is moving. It's the whole pelvis just kind of tips back. So now that we tip back and we are in a more flexed, counter-nutated representation of the spine, we've got more space to go through internal rotation and that nutation as we're descending. So if you're just starting here with that normal like 10 degree of anterior pelvic tilt and you're squatting, you're starting with less room to move through that nutation. If you start, a little bit back, oriented back with a more upright spine, now you got more range of motion to go through, producing that internal rotation force. So that's why we want to use the wedges. It starts you more counter-nutated so you have more room to nutate from. So you're starting more externally rotated so you can produce more internal rotation is another way to think of it.
And since he's shooting his hips so far back, he's forced to hold on.
I mean, that is not far back, like at all. I've seen this done way worse.
Onto this handlebar.
And he's saying he's forced to hold on to the handlebar. You're supposed to hold on to the handlebar on that one.
Which again is ruining the exercise.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with this. If I actually look at his technique, looks like he's actually producing internal rotation force. His feet contacts are good. He's not getting a real big butt wink or anything. So I think, like always, I think Nick is just talking out of his ass. And I like Blessing. He had a response. He was saying, you can't just jump to the conclusion that they're doing shit wrong. You have no idea why. Maybe there's an injury somewhere. Maybe you're trying to avoid as much knee pain as possible, or maybe that's what works for them. Everybody is different at this level. There's a reason why people train the way they do. Whatever works. Just let me cook. Here's the thing. Blessing doesn't have good legs. He's going to get critiqued for whatever he does. This isn't bad, and this is totally fine. If you wanted to get more quads, I would stay a little more vertical and drive those knees a little bit more forward, but this is really good for just total leg development. It's not bad at all. I would never critique this. All right, so enough of that clown. Let's go to somebody that a lot of people might consider a clown, but I don't. He's my bud, Joel Seedman, and I just saw this, and I thought it was pretty funny. All right, so here he's saying stop using steroids, use 90-degree angles instead. So you won't have to rely on garbage aids. Stop using steroids. 90 degrees will get you there. So I love my guy Joel. He puts out a lot of good information. I think he gets a lot of unwarranted hate, but this is kind of silly. It's kind of funny. I promise you. 90 degrees is not going to help me. My biceps suck, so they would be even shittier if I didn't if I had never used gear. I don't think going to 90 degrees would necessarily help them more than the gear I've used. So I mean, this is just one of the things that Joel says is going to get people to kind of make fun of him and call him out, but he's a good guy. Just this one's a little funny to me. Imagine though, if this 90 degrees is so magical for the biceps. What if you were super juiced to the gills and you're doing 90 degrees? Then what? Now we're all walking around like Rully. I don't know. It's worth a shot. I mean, people hate on Joel for being not jacked, but he's got pretty good little biceps for kind of a nerd like he is. All right, so we're gonna do a couple more quick hits. This is a post that I don't like these kind of posts at all, where it's like what does it say? When one move stops all back pain and hip impingements. Like, that's a pretty silly claim to make. So in this one, this is a great move. It could be really, really good, but for me, this would actually fuck me up. So let's talk about what's going on here. So we have the roller placed like right kind of where the tibia is coming into the knee, and we're driving pressure into that point of the knee, into through the femur, essentially trying to drive that femur out through the hip. Now, she's gonna get even deeper. I don't love that. I think she's a little too deep. I don't like the excessive lumbar flexion, but if you needed internal rotation, this would be really good. This is also what drives some internal rotation of the tibia. So you're getting the internal rotation of the tibia at the knee, you're getting internal rotation at the hip. So this could be really good for someone who needs internal rotation. But for someone like me, if I did this on my right side, it would throw me off completely because I'm already really IR'd over there. So if we look at the pelvis, so if we were in quadruped position like she is, we'd be about right here. I'm gonna cross that leg. It's gonna bring this ilium into internal rotation, and that's gonna turn the sacrum towards it. And I'm driving that femur up. So that's what you're creating. You're creating that action with that setup. Now, for me, I fall into a pretty classic left AIC pattern. You guys may have heard me talk about this before. If you're new and you haven't, check out some of the PRI and bodybuilding videos I have. So that means I fall right here. I've got a little excessive IR on the right, a little excessive ER on the left. I already have the sacrum rotated to the right. I'm already kind of in that back hip a little too much. I need to get out of it. So if I continue to just drive more and more and more, it's going to make me more asymmetrical and throw me off even more. So this would be a terrible move for me. But they're claiming it's the one move that will stop all hip pain and impingement. So this is stupid. This is really irresponsible. At least I think nowadays most people don't see this and think like that's the one thing. Like they kind of seen a million things that say they're the one thing. So people are a little more jaded now. But you could be having some serious issues and you think this is going to solve it, and it doesn't do anything but make it worse. But if you need IR, it's a good stretch. Just know your needs. So as I mentioned, for me, a better option would be a move that promotes that opposite of that getting out of the right side, that ER of the ilium. And so just holding the top of an airplane is a really good option. And so on this, I would do this on my right side instead of what she was doing. We're just gonna open up, and as I'm doing that, that's on this right side. I'm starting here. So if I lean over, that's my starting position. This is promoting all of what I need. Getting sacral rotation, I'm getting more of a ER bias on the right side. I'm moving that ilium forward. So you want to make sure the knee doesn't turn in like past the toe on there. You should feel a stretch on the right inner thigh, maybe some activation on the right glute. I also am shortening my left side just very slightly. And it's like a tug of war. I'm trying to like open as much as I can from that hip without orienting my pelvis. So the leg, my back leg is straight up. A lot of times people start to orient, you'll see that leg kind of whip around, and you'll see the butt whip around to the side, or the knee go real wonky. So got to make sure you have your foot contacts good on this as well. Those two inner contact points I talk about a lot, the under the big toe and under the inner heel. So anytime you guys see one of those posts saying this is the greatest thing, the problem is like sometimes it works pretty good. It is exactly what you need, and then you swear by it, and that always becomes your go-to anytime something's off, and a lot of times it's just what helped you acutely right then. So don't fall into that trap. It's really good to know your underlying reasons why something's wrong, and then you can know how to fix it long-term instead of having to do these quick fixes you see on Instagram. And if you guys do have trouble like identifying your issues and knowing how to fix them, I do 30-minute consults, and in December all my clients travel like all over the world, so I have a little bit more free time right now. So I do 30-minute consults. They're $80. My in-person rate's $165, so it's right there. And again, I don't really talk about it that much because I'm super busy, but I have been doing a lot of them, and some people will have me just watch their form while they work out, or just go over questions. I'll have them go on the ground or on the table, and I'll do some assessments and give them some corrective stuff to do on their own, that kind of stuff. So just if you weren't aware, okay, I'm not gonna be pitching stuff, I promise. All right, so this is from Tayla Cannon Physio, and she's another person that just popped up on my feed. And these are 3 things I do if I had a painful knot in the shoulder blade as a physiotherapist. So let's see what we got. Posterior rib cage expansion. Now, I really, really love that this is the very first thing she says, and that's That's not something you see from a lot of traditional PTs. I also like the ball to help create that dome and to help and rotate those ribs to be able to breathe and get more into the posterior expansion. This is a good setup. I like this a lot. We have a thoracic spine rotation would be her second one. And this could be really good. It's not something I always do. Again, it kind of depends on the individual setup. Like I said, if I have somebody who's really anteriorly to posteriorly compressed, but they're in that more oriented forward position, I might do some more T-spine work like this. If they tend to be already pretty like flared and they have that other presentation, I don't really want to compress the dorsal rostral area that much, so I may not go to that, but that's not a great option, so it's not a bad thing. It just might not be exactly what I would do next. I would start with the posterior expansion, though, like she did. I would do a little bit different. I do like that version, but I'll show you what I would do exactly. And then last one is mid to upper back strength through the full range. And so I like this a lot as well. I like the rotation. This is stuff I do a lot. I think this could be super solid. Personally, for me, the only thing I would do different is I'd probably make that just an eccentric focus. Just focus on going to length instead of actually contracting it. If I've got a real tight knot, a lot of times going through a full range is great. It'll help. It'll be fine. But sometimes going through the full range and contracting, like really what you're getting benefit from is that eccentric. And sometimes when it's a really tight muscle, you don't always want to shorten it. Sometimes it's fine. But for me, if I'm trying to get rid of a tight muscle, I'm going to do eccentric stuff first before I go through full range. So not a bad thing, but I would switch it up just a little bit. So if I had a painful knot, I'll show you what I would do personally. All right, so one move I really like is to use this TRX and get set up in this kind of like 90-90 position. So I just lift it up a little bit. I'm not pulling to lift up, I'm just lifting up my butt just barely. You really gotta let these arms like chill and go like to length. You don't want to have any like really activation on it. So I like this versus the one with the ball. I mean, I like the one with the ball. I do that a lot too. That's totally fine. But there are some benefits to doing this version instead if you do have that knot in between your shoulder blades. For one, we are a little bit more lengthened and you're under like lengthened tension. And so that gives you more opportunity to have expansion between the shoulder blades. It puts those kind of tighter muscles in an even more kind of stretch position than if you were just kind of breathing on the ball. And just being like face up, like with your back to the ground, that's going to promote more posterior expansion than using the ball and leaning over it, which again, I really like that. That is totally fine. That could be the best option for you potentially, but this is just another one. When you're on your back, it tends to get all like the viscous fluid, all your blood, all your guts, all your water, and it pushes against the back and makes it easier to expand there. So if you're on your back, you might get more posterior expansion. Something I didn't show on this that is also another really good option that I've shown before is side lying, doing like a side line with the yoga block on your ribs. So I've shown that quite a bit. You would go to the side that the tightness is on. So if you're tight between your shoulder blade on the left, lay on your left side, and that's going to get anterior to posterior expansion on the left side. And since you're laying on the left, same thing as when you're laying on your back, it's going to shift all that blood and all the viscosity to the left side, so you're going to get better expansion there. So a sideline would be really good. This TRX move is really good, and you're doing those same breaths I always talk about, real long exhales like you're fogging a mirror through your mouth typically, and silent inhales. So right here, you also got to pull a little bit of those hamstrings on. And just good breaths. And like I said, the key on this is to make sure you don't accidentally start to activate your back muscles. So this can work really well. So another option that I really like, that honestly is my favorite, I like it best, is to do this one on your back in like a 90-90 position against the wall or with your feet up on a bench. And so this has really helped me. I've got some issues with my left dorsal rostral area being kind of more compressed. Again, I fall very classic left AIC, right BC pattern, so that's pretty common. And so this move has helped me get out of that tightness and out of that restricted mobility many times. And I've even got to points where like this is almost painful, like feeling it stretch from the inside out. So I like this one a lot. You can really feel it work and you can direct the expansion where you want. So I'm on my back, so you get the benefit of everything kind of like I said before, falling to your back, helping expansion. And what I'm doing here is I'm getting like a very slight left side bend. I got to keep my hamstrings a little activated. You got to keep some activation going down on the heels. And I'm reaching across the body with the right hand. Now in PRI and other techniques, they'll do like a reach with one hand. Sometimes they'll do offset. Doing like your elbow bent with one arm straight, that's the same as doing like an offset reach. It's going to promote the spiny processes to rotate to the left. So these vertebrae right here, I don't think they move on this that good, but as they reach across the body, the spiny process will turn a little bit, and that's going to create more space between the spine and the shoulder blade on the left side. And I'm just showing the left because that's where I tend to get issues. If you had it on the right, you could do this on the right just fine too. So as I exhale, I'm going to give myself a slight reach across the body, and I'm trying to really be heavy on my left side. I feel my left SI joint really heavy. I feel the area between my spine and my shoulder blade really heavy, and I feel that getting like space built up within it against the ground. I'm feeling pressure. I'm able to connect to that expansion against the ground. I'm taking up more space in that area. So that is a really good one that I like a lot. Again, remember, you're going to get the benefits of just being on your back. So it's going to push all the fluid to the back, and then you're also turning to the side. So it's like dumping everything into that one back pocket. So I think that's why it is so effective. Now, if you don't have like true 90 degrees of hip flexion, you can also do that from hook lying position, which I've shown as well before. I think that's in the broken bodybuilder leg workout. I think I do that exact variation on a hook line setup. All right, so I definitely agree that posterior expansion should be the first thing that you do. After that, I'm gonna focus on actually getting my sternum and my rib cage to shift a little bit, because if you've got knots, all this type of stuff, this is always a positional issue. And if you fix the position, you can usually fix the issue. And sometimes it's easier to get the axial skeleton to adjust than to get the muscles to let go and then to slowly get the axial skeleton to kind of figure out what to do. So a lot of times if you just put the axial skeleton in a better place, the muscles become less concentrically oriented, they become less tight, and everything becomes a lot easier to make better. So now you can go through, the eccentrics, the full range, but if you do it from kind of a funky position, you're not gonna get as much benefit. Most people are gonna fall into this BC pattern. I mean, most everybody. So regardless of which side you have the knot on, these would work. Now, I personally have never seen someone present with a left BC besides like really acute circumstances. I have seen people present with like a right AIC more often, but usually if they present like that with a right AIC, the rib cage is pretty like peg pattern. It's not really like a left BC, but it's not a right BC. It's just more what we call a peg pattern. So while I know like sometimes PRA gets flack for saying everyone's left AIC, most people are, I do think like almost everybody's gonna be more right BC than not. So these would probably help. So what we wanna do is we wanna get the sternum to be centered. So for a number of reasons, you may have heard me talk about it before, we're asymmetrical, right? Just based off our organ setup and all kinds of factors, your brain and eyes, there's a lot to it. But basically everything causes us to have the sternum to shift to the right, which makes our rib cage have to counter rotate to the left. So the sternum turns to the right, and then to keep yourself from like looking off center and walking weird, we open that up. So as we open that up, we kind of flare these ribs. These ribs become really externally rotated, and these right ribs become really internally rotated. That's how we rotate. So our sternum's pointed to the right, our rib cage is pointed to the left. So in order to fix that, we just need to put you in a position that does the opposite, and you need to be able to breathe. So I'm gonna give you a couple options. You may have seen this one before. This is your right side laying apical expansion from PRI. And this is one of my money moves. Personally, I do this pretty much before every workout, regardless if it's upper or lower, but especially if it's like a shoulder day, this has a big impact on me. All right, so you're gonna be on your right side, and first thing you're gonna do is shift over to that hand, be heavy on the right hand. You wanna kind of feel a little stretch under here in the beginning. You wanna let this shoulder elevate, and you wanna make sure you have those contact points in between the thumb and the index finger and that lower outer palm. Those are the same as your foot contact points. We need to have those to drive internal rotation. And that would lead to proper expansion on the anterior part of your chest, which is what we want here. Okay, so we're going to pull this hip in a little bit, shorten that left side. That's me pulling it in there. You're gonna push down both knees into the mat. If you can't do that, you need to have something to push your knees against. And also, if you can't get your pelvis to be flat on that right side, if you're like tipped backwards, then you need to like elevate yourself, sit on a cushion, sit on a pad on under your right butt cheek or something. All right, so I'm pushing down with both knees, and I'm gonna reach with this left arm across the body, and I'm just gonna let this right arm go straight, a little retracted. And then as you inhale, you're gonna give yourself a pretty good reach with the left hand. As you exhale, you're gonna sink down hard on that hand, crunch on that left side a little bit, never losing pressure on the knees or that sucked up position there with the hip. And you can kind of play around slightly different positions to get a little different stretch, but you can kind of see what we're doing by posting up on that right hand and then reaching across with the left, we're closing down these left ribs and opening up the right while promoting a turn to the left with the sternum. So this is really good. If we can get those left ribs to internally rotate and the right to externally rotate, that'll help us turn the sternum. So you got to make sure as you do this that you don't let your sternum go to the right. So as you're reaching, I'm open, but I'm not going to turn to there. You got to get that reach across so you direct the sternum that way as we have the ribs internally rotate here and as they externally rotate here. So you got to make sure that your left shoulder does not get higher than your right. I was actually super tight this time. Normally my left shoulder is quite a bit lower than my right. So that would be my go-to move to help reposition the rib cage, and then I would follow that up with just this. You might not need to, that might be fine on its own, but I usually like to pair that with this move. All right, so I'm going to be on my left side, and I'm going to give my hand something to support if I can't make contact with this point of my wrist on the ground. And I'm going palm up because I'm going to try to get a little more posterior expansion on that left side. Don't really need as much expansion anteriorly. So I'm going to lift up. I'm going to make sure that I go straight up and I don't like shift back. I'm going to turn over, kind of rotate over just a little bit. Now I'm going to actually shift my legs. I'm going to push this right knee forward as I kind of have that left one back. So I'm feeling a lot of left inner thigh. I'm really lengthening that right side by driving that right hip down and that right knee forward. So that's real subtle, but that's a big one in this. So you can reach overhead to kind of stretch out and ER these ribs. You could do a couple different things with this. So here I'm kind of reaching overhead. You got to make sure to be really pushing away. As you turn over, it's easy to like lose that shoulder position. Keep driving real hard away, and you got to make sure you can breathe from these positions. If you can't breathe, then there's no point of getting in there. You don't own it. So you should be feeling a lot of this activation here. And another option would be to move that right hand back and to go into position of like retraction of that shoulder blade. Because what am I doing? I'm side planked here. I'm crunched here. I'm opening that up into that ER. So I'm getting the rib cage to shift to the right. Okay, and again, I'm promoting that sternum to go to the left, especially as I'm turning down into it. And also by pulling the right arm back, you're going to promote more front expansion. And by doing the left arm that way, you can promote more back expansion, which you probably need as well. Now, you can spice this up a little bit. You probably don't need to. And if you did, you want it to be really light, but you could add a band and get into that retracted position there as well. Everything else is the same. You're just adding very little tension right there. Again, you don't have to, but this is if you want to get a little bit more spicy with it, that would be fine. All right, so I'm going to give you guys one more option to get this rib cage and sternum to shift to get into alignment that we want. And this is really easy. We're just going to sit with our legs straight out in front of us. If you don't have the ability to sit comfortably like that, you need to do this seated. That's totally fine. But what I'm doing is I'm pulling back this left foot. If you're seated, you would pull back the left knee, and I'm pushing forward that right. And I'm going to reach with the left arm forward, and I'm going to pull that right back. So it's kind of similar setup to what we did on the side plank. Same things going on. I'm getting the ribcage to shift to the right as the sternum goes to the left. Getting expansion anteriorly on the right, posteriorly on the left. I feel that left inner thigh and my left ribs closed down. So this is another good option to get that ribcage to reposition. You could also add bands and tension to this. I've shown videos doing that as well. You could just hold the front band, you could hold the back band, or you could hold them both. But again, nothing, you don't have to. It's totally fine just to do this in this position. This is probably all you need. But like I said, just if you want to get a little fancier and get better at keeping these positions, sometimes that can help. Okay, and finally, I like negatives better than going through full range, at least at first. And so what I would do is I would get a pretty good resistance band like this, and I would just do some eccentric only, kind of changing up the path a little bit based off of where I'm feeling. You don't necessarily have to follow the same one. Change a little bit, get different lines of tension, turn into it. So these are just your normal traditional eccentrics. Take about 3 to 6 seconds. But what I have found for these tissues in particular that help, that's a little bit different. It's something that we do if you follow the FRC ISM model, you might incorporate this. It's these overspeed eccentrics. And this is, I found, really helpful if you've got just really stubborn tissues. And a lot of times these tissues back there are really freaking stubborn. So when you do an overspeed eccentric, it's like a rapid lengthening phase. And personally, I've had this get rid of a knot that I had, so that's why I'm talking about it. And it can be a really cool tool that you can have in your arsenal to just help your connective tissue architecture as well. So I'm gonna let it go, and I'm gonna catch it at the end range. So just let it go and catch it at that full range. This is actually pretty bad. I haven't been doing these. It shouldn't like move so much. When you get really good at it, you'll like catch it like all at once. It won't be like that little rebound that you're seeing there. But overspeed eccentrics are a really cool tool. They're also really good for your chest. My guy John Quinn, who I've done a podcast with, who's one of the creators of the ISM model. He works with a bunch of professional NFL linemen. He focuses a lot on overspeed eccentrics on the chest, doing like banded presses, really catching and dropping them, because every single second these linemen are going up, they're smashing against each other. They need to be able to absorb that force. So definitely a good technique that can help release some stubborn areas and also give you better connective tissue to transfer force. So sometimes we got to think about training other parts of our body besides just our muscles. That's what I would do personally. As I said, her 3 things could be totally good. There's nothing bad about that. Definitely try that. But this is what I would personally do. All right, so next we've got Paul K. Barnet, who is not somebody that I know, but he's talking about Nick Walker leg pressing. And I just talked about Nick Walker leg pressing a couple videos ago, and I did not say this, the correct way to leg press. So he's talking about how Nick is using really slow controlled form, and he's not using every single plate in the entire gym, and he's using a really big, deep range of motion. So he's saying that this is like really good, when I'm looking at the actual mechanics of it and the actual setup, and I think this is dog shit. So as I said on the other video, he needs to focus on quads. Homeboy has got the best hamstrings, best adductors like in the game pretty much. What he doesn't have, and what is the biggest detriment to his physique, is lacking quad sweep. So he sets up this leg press in a way that is not going to get any quad sweep. And he is getting a really big range of motion, but that's in part because his pelvis is so anteriorly tilted. So when you're so dumped forward and you sit back, you got a lot of space to move into. If you are a little bit more neutral right away and those legs start coming back, you don't have space to tip into that pad. But if we look at the foot setup, so I mean, never mind the fact that he's not putting tension on his quads. Mechanically, this is just really bad. You can see how turned out his feet are. They're collapsing inward, and I break this down a little more clear on the other video. This is a different scrolling through IG, so I'm not going to go super crazy into detail here, but he's not producing internal rotation. He's not going off those proper foot contacts, and you can see the tibia is ER'd relative to the femur. That means that the foot and the leg are pointing out while the femur's a little straighter, going inward a little bit. This is a compensatory way to produce internal rotation, because you can't do it using your quads and using actual relative motion through normal nutation. You've got to do it this way. And so he also said in the video that this is the only way that he knows how to leg press without hurting his knees. So that's not good. When you run out of options, you only got one way to do something. That means your exoskeleton's in a fucked up position, and you got to start getting it better so you have more movement options available. So this is terrible. As far as form and as far as where he's actually putting on tension, I'm not a fan of this at all. And I said that here. So honestly, I think Nick is done. I don't think he's a top 5 guy at all anymore. I think people have passed him up. I think his gut's gotten worse. I think his health is worse. And I don't think he's going to be a top 5 Olympian ever again. And I like Nick, so I hope I'm wrong, but that's just my opinion. So Dr. Mike is pretty easy to critique on just about everything, in my opinion. His takes on nutrition, his takes on programming. Obviously, his biomechanics are just dog shit. But here, Tnutrition Fitness is talking about his take on reps in reserve. And let's see what this is.
Goddamn.
So I think he's supposed to be going to, what, 1 rep in reserve or 2 reps in reserve? And that was it.
So this was brought to my attention the other day by atlaspowershrugged.
Atlas, never afraid to call out people. My man.
And I have to say, I agree with him. Seems like Dr. Mike just isn't in tune with his body and what his RIR actually is. I'm going to let him explain what he's doing here.
Your 4 work sets, but they're going to be something called my rep match. And I try to go like 2 reps from failure.
So that was supposed to be 2 RIRs when he was doing the press down. And honestly, I've never heard of the term reps in reserve until like a year or 2 ago. I've never thought about it at all. I've always gone to just mechanical failure, like I'm about to lose my ability to maintain relative motion, or I've left like 1 in the tank. Like I've never understood making such a big deal and breaking this down and getting so obsessed with 1 to 3 RIs. What's your RPE? It's like, I go to a 9 or a 10 every fucking time, and that's it, okay? And sometimes I go above that. The important thing is to not go above that or go to a 10 and do it in a fucked up position. If your biomechanics are good, you can push those reps in reserve. Like, I think this is something that a lot of people like put way too much stock in, but let's keep listening.
So that means this set of 22 reps was supposed to be to 2 RIR, but it's just not.
Like, not at all. So something that I was always told was it does not count. Nothing matters until you start to slow down involuntarily. Okay? As long as you get a couple reps there, you're good. So I didn't see that slow down at all. I don't like at all. And to me, this looks like he had a 5 or 6.
I know some people might say, well, he just knows his body. But the problem is failure is preceded by velocity loss on the reps leading up to it.
Exactly.
And he's just going fast the whole way through. It means that he is definitely a lot more than 2 reps away from failure. The only reason I'm making this is because I promised that I would make a video if I saw a science-based lifter that wasn't training hard, i.e. close to failure. This is a pretty good example.
But you got the video of Mike just screaming, throwing his leg curl. That's hardcore, man. He's screaming loud. Come on. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to say it. I think he wants to take the easy way out with everything. He tried to take the GLP to help him look good for the show. He tries to leave 3 or 4 in the tank for everything he does. He tries to take the easy way out with his diet, eats all the stupid shit. So, come on. Don't be afraid to put in work. And what's Lyle saying? Let's never forget that I was the first one to point out that Dr. Mike Israetel trains like a baby and then whines about criticism. I'm glad everybody else is piling on, but credit where it's due. I did it before it was cool. I mean, I did it too before a lot of people. Lyle's been talking shit about Michael forever, but I didn't know who Dr. Michael was until this year. All right, so somebody who was also kind of spoken out about Dr. Michael a little bit is good old GVS. We had a great podcast together, and we talked about Dr. Michael a little bit. And I mean, everybody loves GVS, and for good reason. He's a good guy. He keeps it real. He works hard. He uses his brain. Doesn't just like fall into this science-based traps. And we met because like, I actually like critiqued him in a video, and I wasn't like a dick about it, but you know, it was a critique, and some people just can't handle critiques at all. And he responded and reached out and, you know, liked it. And you know, that tells a lot about somebody, especially in the fitness industry. Sometimes if you just provide any critique at all, someone will fucking hate you, and they'll just take it so personally. I like the fact that he's trying to improve as he's 10 years deep into this natty training journey. And he's also helped me out a lot with my social media, and I've gotten a lot of you guys from him. So I really appreciate that. So let's check this out.
So I did a podcast, YouTube video with Jonathan Warren maybe a couple months ago. I'll link his Instagram, and you could probably find his YouTube channel through there. And he has a really good video on chest pressing and how to keep the tension on the chest. And
so this looks really good. He's doing a lot better job of keeping the ribs down, I think, than he used to.
We're kind of told, or at least I was told, and I kind of just followed it, you got to have a big arch. You got to really set and retract and arch and keep the chest up, big chest.
Which is what everybody was told. And I just instinctively did it different because I felt my pecs better. Now, years later, I know why it was the right move. And I this is what I get more credit for than anything, is people really thank me for changing up their training for their chest.
But I've kind of been doing the opposite with less overall range of motion, but trying to keep the ribs down, keep the abs sort of flat, and using the obliques to draw the rib cage down.
That's money. That's exactly what you want to do. And like I said, it's a good example of how you always need to be able to adapt. Anytime I find new information, I'm always going to consider it. Even if like right off the bat, it doesn't like ring with me, I'm always going to like try to improve. So that was really nice. I appreciated the shout out from there. And then he also shouted me out on the back day. He talked about the back video I did as a masterpiece. So really appreciate that, man. Again, there's a reason why everybody loves Joffrey. He's genuine. He's a good guy. So we've kind of been in this back and forth where I've talked about like the natty guys like GVS and Basement Bodybuilding. They got these 18-inch arms, and it pisses me off because my arms have never measured more than a little over 17 and a half. Granted, I'm always shredded. You know, I'm never not 8 or 9%, but I really want to get bigger arms than these natty guys. So we've kind of been having a little bit of back and forth about it. You know, I posted a video and saying all I want is bigger arms than GVS. But one of my strong points is my delts. I mean, look at that cap. And so I told him, good luck getting these delts though, bro. Not enough androgens in your blood. And I'd always heard that, you know, your delts and traps, they respond really good when you're in gear because there's more androgens there or whatever. You have more androgen receptors there, so you get more androgen in your blood, whatever, something like that. And so I thought my shoulders were pretty safe. I thought I would be all good. But then I hear the scientific snitch kind of dispel that myth.
Myth number 3. read big shoulders, aka deltoids, equals gear usage because there's more androgen receptors in your deltoids. Now I don't know what.
Wait, so this is a myth? I just have good shoulders because I train so well? I do have to say, anytime I, introduce trim, my shoulders get a little extra cappy, so I don't know what there is to that.
Where exactly this bro science originated from.
Yeah, you do. You just put it. It was more places, more dates.
But aside from a few old studies, there's no scientific literature or physiological backing that supports the claim that there's more androgen receptors in some muscles than others, and none of these old studies even focused on your deltoids.
So then I say, oh shit, GVS, I guess I was wrong. Maybe your shoulders can get as big as mine, which would really piss me off. If there's a natty guy walking around with shoulders like me, I don't know if I could handle that. I can give up the arms, okay? I get it. There are some people that just fucking work manual labor and lay bricks all day that got 18-inch arms, all right? But cap delts, okay, 3D, big delts, that's a little harder. And I do think the androgens help a little bit. So I don't think you can catch me on that, but maybe I was wrong. And I really like this girl, the scientific snitch. I think she is awesome. She's going to be coming on the podcast in like a week and a half. And I'm really excited to talk to her. I think she does a really good job at presenting, sometimes complex information really simply. And I think she does a good job of kind of being like a debunker of common myths. And I like that she sticks up for herself. My boy Atlas was going at it with her, and she was not holding back. She goes at it in the comments. So really looking forward to talking to her. I think that'll be a fun conversation. So we've been talking about Atlas and GVS, two guys that I like a lot in the industry on the natty side. And I mean, like I said, everybody loves GVS. Everybody pretty much sucks him off, honestly. And that's why I thought this was so funny when I looked at the stories and I saw this under GVS's icon. So there's Atlas. And there's GVS, and there's GVS's junk, like right where Atlas's head would be. So I don't know. I don't think that could be any more uncomfortable looking. I mean, it's funny because it just takes whatever avatar they use, I guess, and it puts it on the bottom of the other one, and that's just what you got. Because there's GVS's avatar, and you put Atlas at the bottom. You get him sucking him off. So I sent this to him. I was like, dude, why does it look like you're sucking GVS off on his stories? And he was like, oh shit, oh no. Man, that's effed up. You got to be careful these days. And then I thought that was funny. I know it's silly. And then I sent it to GVS too. I was like, man, I know all the natty guys do basically suck you off, so it makes sense. And he agreed. That is an unfortunate placement. So let's see if Atlas stops commenting on GVS's stories just because he doesn't want to be seen blowing them. All right, so I recently had a podcast with Alberto Nunez, who I have actually known forever from back in the board days. Most of the guys that I've met through this process I've never heard of, and I'm very glad to meet them, but I definitely have known this man for, like I said, 20 plus years. I've been seeing him on the board, so I was really happy to talk to him. If you haven't seen that, check it out. And I want to break down the way he does his good morning and the way that he coaches it versus Dr. Mike. All right, so let's check this out, and this looks really good. He's talking about keeping your center of gravity basically the same. Don't let that shift back or forward. He has a neutral spine. So look at his head, look at his spine, look at his feet. Okay, compare these to where we'll see Dr. Mike in a little bit. And so these are really money. He's putting really good tension on the hamstrings, on the glutes, using solid mechanics. I don't see a lot I can nitpick. And he says keep a neutral spine. All right, so that's important to note. Now, if we look at this from the front, I'm so nitpicky. I can actually see where he's biasing more IR on the right side than on the left. This is a more internally rotated represented. This is a little bit further in the hip is more ER'd. That's not a big deal. I mean, we're going to move asymmetrically a little bit, but again, I'm OCD and sometimes you don't need to make a big deal out of everything, but that is a little bit off. Personally, I would do something to get more internal rotation on the left leg, and then I would do this and they would look the same. But again, not a big deal at all. And really important to note that his feet are on the ground and his spine is neutral. I mean, it's not excessively extended. He's not doing anything in the beginning to try to create a ton of lumbar extension. Okay, cool. So let's compare this to Dr. Mike. All right, so what do we see different when we see Dr. Mike go? All right, so first off, we don't try to maintain neutrality of the spine, which again, there's no real neutral, but you don't want to throw everything to extension, especially you don't want to throw that ass back and pop into an anterior tilt right away. We have the feet coming up, the toes aren't even staying down. And if you notice, the left toe comes up worse than the right. And that is indicative of being more dumped forward on that left side of the pelvis. So you see how the right foot's down, left foot's up, okay? Something's funky. So huge anterior tilt to start, shifting the center of gravity too far back, the toes are coming up. So this is not ideal. Definitely do it the way Alberto did. Do not pop that ass back. That is, you don't want to twerk to begin with. That is not the way to initiate a good morning. All right, so let's look at some more from Alberto. Here we have a pendulum, and I love how he's not forcing a crazy huge range of motion. He's keeping tension where he wants on the quads. These look money. Driving IR, feet aren't getting weird. I like this move a lot. I actually used to do a pretty similar variation, and I would do it honestly to drive that back rectus femoris, because you can really get a lot of tension on it because that hip joint's not really moving. So it's almost like you're doing just a leg extension on the back one. Because as you guys probably know, right, if we are moving from the hip joint and the knee joint, like we're squatting, we got the hip joint shortening while you've got the knee joint lengthening. So you really aren't getting a lot of actual like work from the rectus femoris. But in this position you are, because that hip joint's pretty stable. Plus you're gonna get some good quad on the other leg, of course. So if you did see the podcast, me and Alberto talked about this, but I just want to play this clip real quick if you didn't. And I've talked about this before as well, but it's worth addressing.
Why do I move my head up like that when I like dumbbell chest press? I get this question all the time. First of all,
and you'll see a ton of like old school bodybuilders, like giant bodybuilders do that. I mean, I think Branch did that. You'll see that pretty often on big, tight guys.
First of all, the tactic is safe. If you hurt yourself doing this, we got some bigger issues.
Yeah, there's not a lot of risk of hurting yourself doing this. The only negative I would say is that you're gonna reinforce like positional issues and not get like true relative motion, true expansion. But if your main goal in that moment is hypertrophy, then this is a good option. There's nothing wrong with it. Just maybe focus on creating that expansion some other way.
Look, I'd say women in general, it's probably not going to make that much of a difference. But I'd say like average size.
So this is keeping like really good tension on the pecs by moving forward. Like if he wasn't doing that, he's gonna kind of over retract.
To slightly above average size men probably will. So what happens when you kind of roll your head forward like this is you just create more space back there so that all your meats have space to contract. It's one of the...
So I like the way Alberto describes this. He's intuitive and he understands like basically why it feels good. And he's right, it does give you more space, but what you guys may have seen my videos on the chest pressing, so you know I'm real big on keeping the ribs down. Well, what happens if I move my head forward, right? It closes those ribs down. It's just not in a relative motion. I'm orienting them down. And for some people, that is the only option they have. If you're really compressed in the back and you don't have that ability to create that expansion and press from there, then you can artificially create it by moving forward in space. And so if I have somebody who we're trying to restore some relative motion, I'm gonna keep them down. But on that last rep or two, it might come up that does that for me. And if I have somebody we're just like solely focused on getting as big as possible, then it's fine to come up. Like I said, just be aware of what's happening when you do it. You're just playing into your body's kind of less than ideal setup. You can get that same activation without lifting up your head, and that's going to promote more relative motion, but do what feels good. And what do we have here? We have some more presses. So I really like how Alberto doesn't force a huge, crazy range of motion. He's really focusing on the active tension. We kind of talk about it in the podcast if you heard that. He's not lifting up his head on this one though, huh? Interesting. Maybe he started that after working with Chasm, because I know Chasm was big on that. And these seal rows, these are awesome. You don't see him trying to extend at the lumbar or even the thoracic spine. He's just pulling, getting retraction, getting extension from his muscles. He's not trying to orient his body to help him. Really good. All right, so this guy popped up on my IG. This actual video is what I saw, and it just caught my attention. I went to his page, and this dude has like 800,000 followers, and everyone is following him for help with their pain. And that got me a little concerned because this guy does not really understand the language of movement and relative motion. So here he talks about the thing you're neglecting most for your hips is internal rotation. Here's what you can do. But homeboy is displaying no internal rotation at all. This is not what you can do. Do you like not understand like basic kinesiology and like movement? So we can look at him starting here. he's reaching across the body. First of all, he's reaching his weight like far too like outside. It's going way out of his base of support. That's why his foot is coming up. He's in an ER representation, and his pelvis is just moving around to the side. There's no internal rotation happening there at all. Like, at all. All you're doing is just orienting your pelvis around and using a little ER. So if you don't keep those foot contacts, you're not going to drive internal rotation. It's just impossible. And so you can literally see as he goes down this way, your butt should not be moving in that direction. That's not internal rotation. So let's see if I can demonstrate with the pelvis. So he's using the right leg. And so if we were utilizing proper internal rotation, as we go down, we're going to have that sacrum move, and that innominate bone is going to move into a little internal rotation as the sacrum nutates. Okay? We don't have that action occurring as he's hinging over. We don't have this ilium moving in. It's just orienting out. All he's literally doing is hinging and turning his whole pelvis. He has none of that going, just that. So you're getting nothing. You're getting no internal rotation. You're just playing into like shitty movement pattern. This will cross over to all kinds of things. You'll see later, this guy can't produce internal rotation on anything if his feet are on the ground. He's got no IR. I bet if I put him on the table, he'd be like 0 to 10. So honestly, this is horrible. And this is a guy who goes by doctor. Another doctor who doesn't know shit. Jesus. Yeah, so very, very bad. This is just moving around the pelvis. Even if you aren't super familiar with what I'm talking about, you can see this whole thing is just moving as a unit. All right, so I'll show you what this should actually look like if you wanted to do it that way. All right, so I'm gonna do it on the same side. All right, so notice the difference. Okay, I'm not outside my base of support. I have my foot contacts. I'm driving IR. I'm in an IR representation of the femur. It's not rolling outside. I'm not on the outside of my foot. This left hip is turning in. I'm not just moving it around as I go down. Look at my pelvis. It shoots backwards. It doesn't shoot to the side. So this is a lot of relative motion occurring. This is what that should look like. And so from here, you'll be able to see like how the butt doesn't move and go out that way. Straight back. That is internal rotation. That is relative motion. You don't see nearly as much wasted movement. I'm not just corrugating my butt around. And this is pretty basic stuff. So to be a doctor, I don't know what he's, probably a chiropractor or some shit, to be like helping people with their pain, you know, he talks about back pain a lot. You got to know how the hips work. It's kind of ridiculous. So as I said, this guy probably has horrible hip mobility, and he's talking about how he's tweaked his low back this week. Here's how he modified leg day. So, I mean, this is a guy who talks about tweaking his back a lot. And he also has a lot of like programs for people that tweak their back. I don't know if I would listen to this dude. So when we look at this, what are we even doing here, bro? Like, this is just a balanced exercise. There's really no good benefit of this. I mean, if you wanted to produce ER, maybe just like do a split stance and use the bend, this whole walkover thing. You're doing nothing. Like, this is not helping drive any kind of relative motion. You're just displaying what you can do with your shitty setup that you have. No foot contacts, like, this is pointless. All right, so let's look at these. What does his leg day look like? Okay, I'm not gonna complain about these. Now, look at his feet. So look at these swings. We have the feet coming up, the toes coming up here. So this is his left leg. This is a very ER'd position. So again, he's probably in, you know, a pec pattern, but he's definitely got a left AIC beneath that. This femur is already more ER biased because the ilium is forward and the sacrum is turned away. You can see that happening on there. If he was on the right, I bet you would do the opposite. I bet you he'd sink into that hip. Here he's kind of leading forward with the knee, leading forward with the hip. And you can see the shape change that has occurred on his tibia. You know, this is a bony skeletal change that's had to happen because he produces force under load and can't produce real internal rotation. And then you can see the feet, they just cannot find their foot contacts. And that's because he doesn't have real IR. So if we want to see a much better example of it, look at this. Every single position, look, they collapse, they move every single time. You should not be shuffling your feet after every single rep. You should find those contacts, produce your IR, and go from there. And you can see he's collapsing inward because he does not have the ability to produce IR up the closed chain. And so I am not surprised this guy occasionally has back problems. I am surprised that he's trying to help everybody with theirs. Okay, look at the feet. moving every single time, collapsing in. That is a telltale sign you're not going to get big quads if you're doing that. And you're also going to get knee issues and back issues and probably hip issues. Same thing, terrible foot position, ER. I think you kind of get the point now. Your feet should not be coming up at all. On any movement you do, your toes should never come up in the air. And here, he's trying to do an airplane, which is a great exercise, but he's doing it terrible. Same thing, no IR. When he tries to turn in, when he should have internal rotation, he just loses it. So look at this. Right there, you can see he's trying to drive that hip in. Instead of getting that internal rotation on the left side, he's just orienting the pelvis. And again, you can always tell by the foot contacts. When you don't have those foot contacts, you're not driving true IR. You can also see like the knee turns in, the pelvis turns around. So this is like a pretty shitty airplane. So I'll try to demonstrate a little bit better. So as we come down, I'm gonna drive in that right hip, and I'm actually keeping pressure there. You can see my femur's not tipping out. I'm not rolling on the outside of my foot. I'm driving IR. So that is what a much better airplane would look like, much tighter. You can see whenever I drive up, my knee's not pointing in. I'm not turning the pelvis. And these type of things matter when you do these movements and you're trying to drive relative motion. That is the goal. You have to work with relative motion. Like, I'll give you the other angle so you can see. Oh, I have my foot cut out from where I'm recording this, but I have my foot contacts there. But you can just see on this, there's no rounding, no turning of the pelvis at all. Just drive up, use that glute, use relative motion. So here he actually isn't losing himself because he's not trying to get as much IR. He's just stopping before he gets to IR. So that's why he doesn't roll to the outside and it doesn't look as bad. He's not really getting much IR at all. So this is a move that I actually like to do a lot if I want to do kind of a loaded version and get some benefits that come with the airplane. I'll do a setup similar to this. Kind of hinging, but I'm a little more upright than on an airplane. And I'm going to let that arm just drape across me with that weight. And I'm keeping those foot contacts. And this is a great way to get that glute med activation, to get some ER, bias relative motion on whatever side you're working. And these burn, 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 baby. So that's just a different way I like to kind of structure an airplane on a leg day, get a little bit more tension on it. All right, so here's a guy that popped up on my page, and he actually works right down the street from me pretty much. He's in the same city. And he was doing a very similar move that I showed with the other guy, this internal rotation bias kind of hinge, and he actually does it a lot better. So let's look at this setup. So he's doing this for the girl's glutes, but he's actually like making sure she's got good IR on the way down. So just look at her foot contact and you can see what I'm talking about. That is true internal rotation. So this kind of meathead kind of bro is doing a lot better work with his girl just trying to work her booty than the doctor guy trying to like help people with their pain. So let's take a look at some of the other things that this guy does at his training style. All right, 3 game-changing movements to grow your butt. Single leg Smith kickbacks. I don't really love those. It's pretty hard to not get crazy extension when you're doing it. I guess that's why he's trying to like to keep her from going into big extension or something with his hand there. But I'd rather just do a normal kickback. Single leg reverse hyper kickbacks. I like these. I do these with a lot of my ladies. And again, we've got that hand on the low back to like make them aware or something. Not sure. Enhanced sumo squats. So I like using the band. These are good. Oh, and we've got more hands on the low back, upper butt to help for some reason. I'm sure that's doing something. What else do we got? Okay, these booty builder machines. All the girls love these. All right, so this is, he kind of has her knees externally rotated out. Like a lot of people like train their butt when they're like ER'd. I mean, you're going to work some like side glute stuff, but when that's all you do, you kind of become pretty dysfunctional. If you only use bands around your knees all the time when you hip thrust, like sometimes you should hold a ball between your knees. That actually going to get more like real glutes, more of your like real ass, because you're getting like length and tension on it. You're getting full short and tension on it whenever you don't turn out the knees. Like if you're doing a RDL, if you go real wide with your feet and turn out your knees, you're not actually getting all that much glute max. Like you should come a little more narrow and you're actually going to get real length and tension on the glutes. So this can promote kind of dysfunction, but you know, if you're really careful about it, I don't think it's the biggest deal. So we're doing kickbacks. So like, I guess this guy's main thing is work with girls' butts. And I mean, he's big with the hands on the low back. I mean, that's like a sensual area. And he is all about it. And I don't know what he's really cueing while he's doing this. Like, I mean, I touch my people a good amount, but I have purpose behind it. All right, we're going to dead. Okay, I guess she needs help getting in that position. All right, that's kind of funny. All right, this guy's very handsy. That's actually a terrible deadlift too. She's coming up like way too close down, getting way too much orientation. You don't want to like flare up, but you don't want to over compress as you do that either. You don't want to look right at the ground. This is way too rounded on the way up. But yeah, man, this guy is like very handsy, huh? And here, man, we are paying close attention to the form for sure. I mean, that is, that's a good trainer with a watchful eye. I wonder if he's as watchful if it's a dude. Probably. Oh, we have some bridges. And, oh, did he just stick his thumb up her butt? That's a good way to get somebody to jump up. I thought he just, slid a finger up there. That'll get them to thrust up quick. What an interesting way to brace somebody. And thumb up the butt. Drive up. Man, I don't know if I would want my girl to train with this guy. Okay, so here we have a not butt workout. These are some back movements. All right. He's really specific to where he wants people, but I don't know if he has an exact purpose. Now, like, why does he want to create as much extension while they do this as possible? Like, that's not a good position to be pulling from. This is going to play into their already kind of funky exoskeleton positions. They're already in that position. Don't produce a lot of force from there. Like, she should close down those ribs. Like, you can still lean forward if you want. So even in this, that's just too much of like global extension. And then these girls, they train their legs the way they do with such crazy anterior tilts, it transfers over to every other body part when they're working out. All right, we have more. What the fuck is happening here? Why would you have her just go into like global extension and pull this? This looks terrible. Like she's like doing the wrestler head brace on the ground. And the thing is too, all these women that have this kind of posture, they already have neck issues. Like I train some like pretty like good looking girls that work out hard, that have that crazy tilt. They all have got neck issues. It is like universal. They got low back issues, but almost universally these girls have neck issues. And it's because they breathe like without having like their diaphragm work at all. They go, everything, it goes up. The traps are real tight, their neck's real tight. Again, we're getting too much compression off of that, just reinforcing bad things. What else we got? Top 5 kickback variations. Kneeling upright. Now, I think a lot of girls go way too overboard on the cable stuff. I do think there's some benefits. But yeah, look at this girl. Look at that crazy anterior tilt there. Like, I would not like do that all the time. Make sure that you're not stuck in one position for 100% of your exercises, regardless of the body part. It's probably not a good thing when your hips look like that every single training session for every single body part. And again, you're going to be better off, not relying on a ton of cables to build up your butt. But I get it. Girls like it, and you do a lot of volume for your butt, so it's fine. It's just way easier to get into excessive like extension of the low back, even if you're being really aware. Like this guy is pretty aware. He doesn't let it get too crazy, but it's gonna happen. All right, so let's look at him work with a dude. So at least he doesn't just work with women. Let's see if he gets his handsy with this guy. Oh, okay, yeah. So at least he doesn't like only touch women. He spreads the love. And I mean, I actually like the form on all these. This is good. Yeah, there we go. Get in there. Spread it around. Make sure you don't come off as a creep by just touching chicks. Yeah, he's a handsy dude. For sure. And actually, I like these. These are good. He's trying to focus on the rear delt. He's talking about not letting yourself get too much retraction. So I know I'm giving this guy a hard time, but I'm just joking around. I think he's, not doing anything too bad. He is pretty handsy, but I don't think it's because he like trying to be a creep. I mean, maybe that's a little bit of benefit. You got some like cute girls, and you can kind of touch their low back a bunch. But I think he does it to like make himself feel more needed as a trainer. Like he's providing more value by positioning every little thing. I don't think he's trying to be a creep, but I do think that would be really funny if somebody just did like a supercut of this guy like touching everybody and just put it in one big montage. So that's what I did. Let's check it out. Oh, nice. Get in there. Yeah, this one is hilarious. It's like he's getting her in position to be ready for, Let's tilt you forward as I'm behind you. That's a great look. And there's that super intense focus on the glutes. This one's funny. Let's see how many times he's going to touch her. 1, 2 places so far. Knees. Okay, we pat you on the hamstring. Now we got the back. And we're going to puppet master you up. That's a real good move. Slap the butt. That's important. Slap the other hamstring and back down, and we're going to puppet master you back up again. Yeah, and then go back to the butt. Every time, puppet master to butt. Here we go. Really got to hold these knees in place. That's super important. You really got to like put those fingers on those little SI joints so you know that they're there. This is the finger up the butt move. This is a great tool in your toolbox if you're a trainer and you're really trying to get more out of your hip thrusts. Just thumb up the butt. Could grab the machine and pull from the bottom, but no, let's grab that inner thigh. Yeah, I mean, these are all super useful techniques and have a ton of purpose, I'm sure. She didn't know to turn that way. She didn't know to drive IR that way. You had to show her. Puppet master again. Got hand on the foot and the low back. Like, those are both really necessary. Especially on a row. And we're going to grab your foot. That does absolutely nothing. That makes it harder. That probably fucks her up. No, that didn't look right. Now it looks right. Nah. You need my fingers of wisdom, my fingers of guidance. Yeah. You're not lifting them up all the way on your own. I'm going to help you. Like, that's so unnecessary. And you need to lean over. You need my help to know how to lean over. Like, you're making the exercise weirder and harder. So, I mean, literally, this could go on for, like, days. I had to cut this way short. I mean, I literally had, like, a 30-minute supercut, and I was like, I got to cut this down. I mean, I'm just giving them a hard time. Like I said, you could probably do a supercut like this and make it just as bad with my clients, but it'd be over a long period of time, but they would have intent behind each one. I don't do a lot of the puppet master stuff and the small of the back, but I do a lot of things that could look questionable if you were to put them in a video like this. So no hard feelings. I'm just playing around. I don't think you're a creep at all. I just think that is a little bit funny and kind of unnecessary, and I could definitely see how we could come across the wrong way if you're just watching. All right, so that is all I got for you guys. If you have any suggestions for next time, leave them in the comments below. I put it in the description. I don't talk about it often, but I do have a membership option for my channel. And if you join that, you just get early access to the videos. We do Q&As there about every week or so. I'll post. And if you have any questions at all about anything, whether it's your physical fitness, your body, pain, injuries, anything at all, I try to answer it. And I also put some videos up there just for you guys that will never have ads. So if you want to support the channel, check that out. It's like $5 or something. And that just makes it easier for me to spend more time on this, because eventually I'd like to take off a little bit of my time doing in-person training so I can focus on this a little bit more. And that's hard to do because I make good money in person, especially compared to the shitty money I make on YouTube. So anything you guys do to support it, I really appreciate it, but totally unnecessary. If you can, just share the videos and let people know about the channel. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.